This is Jonathan Ferguson, the Keeper of Firearms and Artillery at the Royal Armouries Museum in the UK, which houses a collection of thousands of iconic weapons from throughout history. And on this week's episode, since the release of the Elden Ring DLC Shadow of the Erdtree has got us in the mood for Soulsborns, we're looking at some of the firearms from Bloodborne.
Apologies to the artist ahead of what I'm about to say, but that's the ugliest blunderbuss I have ever seen. Hopefully that's a badge of honour designing for this game and not a criticism per se.
We've also got another FromSoft episode in the works, so make sure to subscribe to avoid missing that, and of course let us know what other games you'd like to see us cover in the comment section down below. Right, over to Jonathan.
It's a pretty good looking flintlock pistol, well, in the scheme of things. Flintlock firearms in general are not done justice in many games. So in terms of the design, it's very stylized, but this, believe it or not, is based on a real design of flintlock pistol. Turkey, the Balkans, that region, they have a particular style of pistol in detail, but specifically that metal sort of almost handguard looking thing on the top of the barrel is purely stylistic. You don't grab it there at all, obviously. That is a real feature. And together with the decoration, maybe the shape of it, but it's hyper stylized. I do have a pistol this is actually from Kosovo. So it's not quite, it's in the sort of right ballpark, and it's the right sort of, this is the real version of what's in the game, but it lacks that classical Eastern European, if you like Mediterranean area decoration. And it has the basic lines of a flintlock pistol, of the flintlock pistol that we see in the game. So a really good example of a very fantasy modified real world thing. Importantly for me, it has the main bits of a flintlock present and correct. So, well, present certainly. So there's the cock. This is missing its flint, as they often are. The frizzen and the pan here. This should of course be to use it needs to be cocked. Famously, powder in the pan and the pan closed. I don't know if the game is going to show us that. Typically, they'll be modelled in their rest state, and they'll just stay like that, and magically bullets will come out. So I'll see if I can spot that. But the recoil of these things is very low. You'll have some muzzle rise. They're fired as an extension of your arm, essentially. So the arm at full stretch for cavalry style pistol, which is what this is. And then they've modeled the sort of to the side recoil of something like a Desert Eagle or something insanely powerful, which this isn't. This is a magical monster killing pistol though. So the recoil may well be very high, I don't know. Right, another real-world inspiration here. So this is, I'm not sure what that great big lever on the side is doing. I might find out in a moment. But this basic configuration of a pistol barrel in the hilt alongside the blade of a sword. We should be able to show you an image of one of ours. I can't lay hands on it at the moment, but we have two from memory, combination gun, sword, short sword, hanger things. The gun bit, I can't get a great look at. There's some kind of mechanism running to the muzzle there, which I don't understand. There's a visible trigger inside the knuckle bow, so that there's a knuckle bow with a protruding guard on it, and then a double shell guard, which is kind of bizarre. What's going on there? It appears to be transforming. Is it an extended barrel? That's what it looks like. The barrel is extending out from the action. If you've got enough negative space inside the body, the receiver of the gun, for the barrels to be stored in it, you've done something wrong. Because you need a mechanism in there. So extending barrel guns look cool, but they don't really make any sense. The closest we've got in real life are sort of pocket pistols where you can screw a barrel on, but there's a barrel in already there. I think that's what's happening. There's a lot of kind of smoke and mirrors, almost literally here, as to what the heck's going on. Gatling gun. So it's interesting that Dr. Richard Gatling exists in this universe. undeniably cool with the big hat, the long coat, whatever weapon that is on the right arm, and then an insanely huge electrically driven or magically driven minigun Gatling gun thing with cases spewing out. It's complete nonsense, of course, but it's great fun. It does make me sad that the 1,000 round per minute, presumably rifle caliber Gatling gun does so little damage to these things, even with apparently magic bullets. So speaking of magic bullets, so I've seen two references, I think, now to Quicksilver ammunition. Now, as the chemists amongst you will know, Quicksilver is not silver. You can't just put another word in front of silver and make it silver, but more so. Quicksilver is mercury. Shooting mercury at beings that are vulnerable to silver presumably wouldn't do very much. I mean, mercury's toxic, so it wouldn't do them any favors in the long run, but I don't think it's the effect that they're going for. So I think that's a bit of use of language, hoping that you're not familiar with what Quicksilver actually is. And I guess I don't see why they've invoked magical bullets in this, because the guns are so ineffective. It would make more sense, especially if you had silver bullets were super rare and they did loads of damage, and then the ordinary guns use ordinary bullets. And then it would be like Dog Soldiers, which is the best werewolf film of all time. Fight me. In which the silver bullets would be the only thing to do damage. The MP5s and the G3s and things can only drive them back, which is seemingly what we see here. And that's actually very consistent with the folklore. There's a good episode of Loadout on this, by the way, where conventional firearms they can buy you time, but then it's your whatever magical or species-specific weapon you're using, like a wooden stake or whatever, that can do the real damage. So it's kind of not quite there for me on the lore side so far. Oh, right. Here's this sort of spear arm gun thing. We have got a couple of spear, like gun spear combinations in the collection that hopefully we'll be able to show you some point. Neither of them are very similar to this, but this is much different. This is very short, almost more like a sort of road digging tool, really, with a huge spear point, or it's more like an arrowhead, really, reminding me of the EDTA glove weapon from Blade 2, which maybe it's inspired by, given the subject matter of the game. So he's using that to sort of punch in this chemical that will kill vampires. Here it just seems to be doing damage. I like the sort of wind up, showing that you're using your own muscles to drive it in, not just however it's operated. Okay, a cannon, a +5 cannon, no less, because of course large metal tubes can be upgraded somehow. Sorry, overly sarcastic there. It's RPG stuff. Large prototype firearms. I mean, this is questionably a firearm. It's literally called a cannon. It's a massive caliber. It looks like something that a non-superhuman wielder wouldn't even be able to pick up very easily. It's overly convoluted in design, I would say. Those flanges, those reinforcers, as we say, do exist. You've seen them, I'm sure. Probably walked past some in Britain, because they were used as bollards latterly. This is not a bollard. This is a gun. Now, as to the actual deployment of this weapon, kind of does what you'd expect. The thing on the top that I spotted is just some sort of guard or handle and guard, more like a shield boss equivalent for a big gun. There's no visible mechanism. It just magically ignites, just like it magically reloads. It plays its role perfectly well, though. It looks like a cannon. The big cascabel and the button on the back there. If it didn't have those, we might go, doesn't really look very cannon-y. But it definitely does. We have a much more conventional and even bigger cannon here on a field carriage, mounted rather precariously on a sort of rocky bit of terrain there, which I would not be happy with. I'm sure a gunner would be even less happy with. But the carriage is a pretty conventional design. It's fantasy, but it's not very different than a real field carriage would be of maybe the later 17th century or something. And the gun itself, likewise, it's just got too many reinforcers, and they may be a bit too square edged. So let's see what the destruction of this is. Oh dear, that's terrible. So I was getting all excited there about this impressive field piece, you know, the scourge of the 17th, 18th, 19th century infantrymen and cavalrymen alike, king of battle, whatever, you know, Ultima Ratio, all that nonsense. And what do we get? But boom. So whoever loaded this thing is very short on gunpowder or very short on skill, because there's hardly any gunpowder in that gun. And then even the explosion of what's, I think, meant to be some sort of shell, so a hollow iron sphere with explosive within it, is kind of unimpressive as well. So I don't know if that's an in-game joke, or maybe it does a lot more damage to enemies, but it's pretty disappointing. Okay, so this has some sort of a furnace inside it, seemingly. Anyway, it's a giant impact weapon with some kind of explosive effect. Kind of like a gun on a stick. Surprisingly, we do have something from our world that is a pretty close parallel to this thing. This is called the Cash Knocker. It's a bit grim, frankly. I mean, I know guns are often for killing people, but this is for humanely dispatching animals. This is a trigger, plunger, that gets hit when it impacts, and then it's a captive bolt gun. So that just shoots out part way. So it's not a firearm, it's an explosively powered impact weapon, which is what I'm seeing here. So this has a trigger at the end of the grip, and it's about reach and positioning. But clearly, in a sort of zombie apocalypse scenario, you could swing this around and it has a hell of a lot of impact, like a big heavy hammer. And if you contact, it also has a really devastatingly powerful piston that shoots out and will crush whatever's under it. So it's I don't know what to call it. I think that's why they called it the Knocker. It's really quite alarmingly similar to what I'm seeing in front of me here, albeit without the burning magical furnace thing. And if that's not Bloodborne-y enough for you in terms of aesthetic, how about this one? This is early 20th century, first half of the 20th century. I'm no expert on humane killers, but it definitely has that brass and wooden, nicely made look to it. It also has a conventional firearm hammer shrouded here. This fits the aesthetic better, but as far as the proportions and maybe the effect, I mean, I guess they do the same job. The more modern example is a good fit. Okay, that makes everything I've seen so far look conventional. A piercing rifle fired one-handed from the hip. It has some sort of crutch-style buttstock on the back, but our friend here is not interested in using that. The shape of it's very odd. I guess it's a sort of spear, half-pike rifle. I can't see how you'd shoot it accurately as a rifle. Can't see any sights. It does have the butt on it, but it almost looks like a weaponized crutch to me. I'm not sure what the sort of barbs part way down are. I guess if you are meant to be shoving that into an enemy, well, those would make it impossible to pull. Well, not impossible, I guess, but harder to pull out. Not sure what the advantage there is. I mean, historical spears have barbed points sometimes, but there's usually a reason for that. This looks more like an aesthetic choice. This is also apparently a rifle with a gigantic wheel on the side. Impressive piece of design, but we're veering hard into the anime scale and balance weapons here. It's got a sort of sword handle and pommel, almost like a modern auto cannon look to it, but it has an octagonal barrel, which instantly says 16th, 17th, 18th century. I don't know what the great big wheel on the side does. I was tempted to say someone's misunderstood how a wheel lock works. So we've got design elements of a wheel lock. I don't have a problem with it being in this world. I mean, the wheel locks were still used for sporting purposes and well into the 19th century, and they look cool. And in many ways, they're certainly better than matchlocks, and arguably sometimes better than flintlocks as well. So it's nice to see the wheel locks in here. What's throwing me off is the gigantic cartwheel on the side. Don't know what that does. I don't think they have misunderstood that aspect of the wheel lock. I think that's some additional feature to the smaller wheel that they have modeled. What they haven't got right, exactly like the flintlock, is that the dog is just sitting here doing nothing. There's no turn of the wheel. There's no reloading process. There's no sliding pan. So it's the barest minimum of there's some sort of wheel, there's some sort of dog for the ignition system. But really, they're there as visual interest. This is an old gun. This is telling you this is an old gun. There's no interest here in actually making it make sense. But hey, look at the actual weapon. Why would you care about it making sense? Okay, this is interesting. I think I like where this is going. It's a sort of, well, I won't say steampunk, but fantasy Victorian flamethrower based on a sort of blowtorch / oil lamp thing. There's absolutely no need for the projector to pivot upwards on firing like that I can think of. Might not be my favorite flame effect that we've seen so far with game flamethrowers. It's a little bit kind of ephemeral. It's not that sticky, gloopy, horrifying, burning fuel thing that we've seen done so well lately. It's an old school take on a flamethrower. It's just like blowtorch, not true effect of a flamethrower. Apologies to the artist ahead of what I'm about to say, but that's the ugliest blunderbuss I have ever seen. Hopefully that's a badge of honor designing for this game and not a criticism per se. Big, heavy, squarish, clunky barrel, oddly designed stock. Of course, the protagonist doesn't even use. I haven't got a sort of carbine blunderbuss to hand, but we've shown them before on this series, and they're very, sounds silly for a blunderbuss, but a lot of them are quite delicate in terms of their look. They're designed to be aesthetically pleasing, to be lightweight. This is kind of the antithesis of that. What it's closest to really is a medieval hand cannon again, but a real size and shape one. Some of them were very large, but instead of being on a haft, big stick essentially, this has got a more conventional firearm stock. But there was never anything in history that looked like this. I'm sure you don't need me to tell you that. Okay, so blunderbuss again, but in pistol form. That style of decoration on the barrel always makes me think of cheap die-cast replicas, but does exist. We have a number of things in the collection where essentially you start with more metal than you need and you chase away the metal and leave those raised bits of decoration behind. One of those things is a Lorenzoni repeater with a lever action, and it's just beautifully decorated in that style. I'd be interested to know what visual reference was used to come up with that. Is it coincidence? Is it based on fantasy armor? Or did someone see an actual firearm with that style of design and extrapolate from there? So a real blunderbuss pistol, best I could do at short notice, is missing a couple of bits, is this French piece here. As you can see, much, much smaller, because to be a pistol, it can't be too long and heavy. This is actually really quite light and pointable. Very exaggerated, flared muzzle on this one. I think I like this more than the Balkan style flintlock. Just being a bit shorter, I think it makes it look more wieldy. Oh, I see. So this is a volley pistol. So this is firing both barrels at once. It's then needlessly spinning around. There's no clear reason for the barrel cluster to spin. Spinning barrels are a thing. They're called turnover guns or pistols or whatever they happen to be. You fire one barrel with usually for a flintlock, the pan attached to each barrel, so you have double pans and then one lock behind it. For a wheel lock, you would have all the mechanism back here and the barrels just rotate, and all you have is a pan. Point being, you either rotate the barrel to fire one shot, rotate them again to fire the second shot, or you have them fixed and you fire either one and then the other, or both at once like this is. Firing both at once and then rotating it achieves absolutely nothing. But that is a spiffy hat. Thank you all for watching the guns of Bloodborne. That was a pretty wacky one, I'm sure you'll agree, but fun to do. We do have here at the Royal Armouries 3 museums, which you can visit, hopefully. If not, and as well, we also have a lot of social media stuff going on. I myself am on our own YouTube channel that you might like to check out if you like people babbling about guns, which is what I do there. But whatever happens, you're pretty sure to see me here again next week on GameSpot.